BBC World Service. This is Radio Australia.
Radio Canada International. Hello.
Radio Moscow World Service is...
Roger, Roy. You'll signal 5959 in the Solomon Islands. 9 Victor 1 Whiskey Uniform. 9 Victor 1 Whiskey Uniform. Thank you very much.
The new world of amateur radio. A place of electronic marvels and friendly people. A stage for fun and adventure. This is a ham radio station, specially set up to tune in on that world. And these are our guides. Kelly Howard, N6PNY.
That's N6P Netty. Ham radio's a great way to meet new friends.
Nathan Pyle, KB6PLH.
It's a great way to talk to your friends all over the world.
Roy Neal, a network newsman whose amateur radio call is K6DUE.
You know, if there's one thing we ham radio operators have in common, it's that we are communicators, and we share an adventure every time we turn on our radios. So now, let's set out on our odyssey around the world, around the new world of amateur radio. I'll beam us up into space to one of our astronaut hams, W5LFL, Owen Garriott.
The reception up here is pretty weak. I was not able to pick out as many stations as I wanted, but certainly was hearing them all the way from California to Mexico City, and then a little bit later down into Chile and Argentina.
Ham radio is adventure, the thrill of going places and doing things. Some time ago, a group of Australian scientists took an expedition to the Antarctic, to barren Heard Island, and they talked to fellow hams from that land truly down under, a land of the seals and the penguins.
Heard Island. Do you copy Neil Evans?
Congratulations on starting up, and it certainly has me tickled pink to be the first station to work here. VK0HI from VK6 Flying Saucer.
King Hussein of Jordan is JY1. One of his adventures came when astronaut Owen Garriott flew over Jordan in the space shuttle.
This is Juliet Yankee number 1. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. This is W5 Lima Foxtrot Lima coming right back. I just passed over the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba. I'm looking down on your country right at this time, sir.
Hams went to a road race in Old Mexico. Amateur radio was there to share the excitement.
We have a Mike Shackey, vehicle number 303, who is also involved in that area, and he needs a four-wheel drive to pull him out with a rope.
Understand. Thank you very much.
If you've ever seen the Parade of Roses from Pasadena, California, you've seen ham radio in action. You might have even seen a ham radio operator standing on a street corner somewhere. Us hams have been helping parade officials for years now.
And ham radio also has helped track officials. I'm a runner myself, and in New York, Boston, and Los Angeles, ham operators have helped track officials with communications.
Number 15, sprained ankle.
In China, they even go so far as to stage treasure hunts, fox hunts they're called, using radio receivers and directional antennas to search out hidden transmitters. And they run these events as foot races. In China, ham radio doubles as a sport, if you will. Dick Rutan and Gina Yeager wrote history when they flew their voyage around the world non-stop without refueling.
We only had one HF radio, and it was primarily tied up with HF communication to the air traffic control system. But when that was not available, then we used the ham radio bands. They provided, at times, vital information for tracking and weather and so forth for the project.
And for would-be pilots who like to fly their own, there are even radio-controlled model planes. When you're on the air, you never know who you're liable to meet. For example, country and western star Chet Atkins.
Hello there, I'm Chet Atkins. You probably know me as a guitarist, but I'm also an amateur radio operator. Have been for over 20 years, and my call is WA4CZD.
In the new world of amateur radio, you might also hook up with the Old West and learn a few things philosophically about hams from a senior statesman, Senator Barry Goldwater, K7UGA.
The hams come in all shapes and sizes. There are little hams and some are larger. And some are even bigger than that. There are boy hams and girl hams. There are grandfathers and grandmothers too. Amateur radio operators come in all shapes and sizes, and each one is an individual. And each one has a personal set of call letters, all their very own to prove it. They belong to a very exclusive fraternity. A couple of million people all over the world are licensed to go on the air and use special frequencies to communicate. There are German hams, Japanese, Chinese, Indian. There are English hams and French ones. A great number of Americans, white ones, black ones, brown ones, and yellow ones. They come in all colors and nationalities, but they speak a common language. Some even wear funny hats. And some have funny cards. They like to congregate in conventions and in communes and out in the fields. They talk with their voices, and then they also talk with their fingers in code. Some have physical handicaps. Others are athletes. But they all have one thing in common, ham radio. And all of them are communicators, sending out and exchanging thoughts in an ever-changing world. Through the magic of their radios, amateur radio operators, hams, have fun communicating. And that's what we're all about.
From his big radio station in Arizona, Senator Goldwater loved to talk to faraway places. Hams call that DXing, and one of the best-known world-class DXers is Hollywood producer Dave Bell, W6AQ.
When you sit down at your rig and go on the air, it's just like going fishing. You never know what you're going to catch. That's the thrill of DX. You might tune across a group from India who went to an island in the Indian Ocean and worked the world from the Laccadives. That was an organized trip to a rare location. That's what's known as a DXpedition. A group of Dutch hams got special permission to use the Radio Netherlands shortwave transmitter site in Flevoland for amateur contacts just before it went into regular international service. They ran ham equipment into those giant antennas, and all of us enjoyed the contacts. From Copenhagen, you might talk to some Danish amateurs who go to the War Museum every Saturday to activate spy radios, artifacts from World War II that still work. You can chat with this chap in Munich, or a group of DXers from Nairobi in Africa. Drop in to say hello to Japan, which has more ham radio operators than any nation in the world. Go behind the Great Wall of China, a country that took its hams off the air for many years, but allowed them to come back on in the 80s to provide the rest of the world with a rare insight into their way of life. And on Christmas Island, there's Phil, T32AN, whose station is literally in a packing crate, but in the South Seas, who needs a mansion? And there are lots of DXers in the Soviet Union. And the ultimate DX, bouncing signals off the moon, EME, Earth, Moon, Earth. DX, long distance, talking anywhere in the world. For some of us, that is the most fun in this new world of amateur radio.
You might think that hams are loners who like to closet themselves with their equipment. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Kelly, Nathan, let's go to a ham fest.
I'm ready, let's go.
What are we waiting for?
automatic antenna tuner, which tracks, as you turn your dial, 32 tunable memories.
First of all, something that's completely new to ham radio is something similar to facsimile, but it's on a real-time basis.
Well, radio served you well, it looks like.
Oh, it's got a skin up. I use one.
Well, that's good.
This is the biggest such gathering in the world. It's the Hamvention in Dayton, Ohio, where more than 30,000 licensed amateurs get together every spring.
They look at equipment.
They swap tall tales.
They get boings and drop me out of the system.
Horse trade in flea markets.
Hold forums to talk about what's new.
And generally have a lot of fun.
We're having a special on the hemostat. Keep your hemostats, calling hemostat, and drink hemostat.
Overseas at these meetings, the language is different, but the action's just the same. Hams have clubs and hold meetings. They have projects. For example, a youth forum in San Diego.
I was there.
Yeah, we met Tony England, the astronaut.
But the biggest event for most clubs every year is Field Day, when amateur radio operators go out, set up equipment in fields under emergency conditions, and talk.
CQ Field A, CQ Field A, CQ Field A. This is N6ME, Mike Echo. N6ME calling CQ Field A for the satellite.
CQ Field A, CQ Field A, CQ Field A. KA2 UFN, standing by.
Here we go.
Looks good. You're 3ALA, 3ALA, QSL?
QSL, that's for the contact.
We're 5 Alpha Orange. 5 Alpha Orange. Over.
It's not hard to get a ham radio license, but you do have to pass a test. There are books and magazines available for study. And there are schools. Gordon West School, for one, in California. Watch the maestro teaching code.
Okay, ready? The letter A. N. T. E. E. So it is possible on amateur radio to have your signals at normal.
West also teaches radio theory and practice. He uses laser and clouds of smoke to show his students how radio waves bounce off the atmosphere as they work their way around the world.
It looks like a straight beam. It really does some very interesting things when it hits a different refractive index.
And there's even a ham radio comic book consisting of Archie and his friends. And there's a school in New York, Mrs. Carol Perry, and she teaches a ham radio class. And she just recently had some of her students act out some scenes from the Archie comic book.
Very good. Let's do the part of the Archie comic book skit where you try to contact your friend in South America via third-party traffic over the radio.
Come in XM9SM, XM9SM in San Melas. This is KA9DIL in Riverdale. Do you copy?
That's fantastic.
And there's another teacher, Peter Kemp, KZ1Z, in Connecticut, who also has ham radio as a regular course at his school.
That section of the band, I think you'll do a little more, find a little more action.
Calling CQ, CQ, CQ. November 1, Echo Papa Mike. Calling CQ and listening.
Okay, Tina, so what you're going to want to do is sort of frame Brian in a little more closely so we get more of a headshot. All right, so now that we have them all focused in, you're going to want to transmit the signal. So move your hand around to this button here. All right, now flip it up to transmit, and the red light will come on, okay? And so now we're sending the signal out via the fast scan, the amateur television.
At another school in New York, there's a teacher who uses radio to help his kids learn English and geography and math. Joe Fairclough, WB2JKJ at junior high school number 22.
Good.
On the board, you've got 4 nouns, all related to ham radio. What I'd like you to do is copy the words down and at your desks, translate them to CW, to Morse code.
Yes, I am too.
There are special schools for the handicapped, the handy hams, who, more than any others, seem to benefit the most from taking part in ham radio.
May an amateur station transmit a message in a secret code in order to obscure the meaning?
There's a ham station in the United States Senate building. One day, by invitation, Senator John Glenn, America's first man in orbit, got on the air to explain politics by radio to science teacher Bob Waller's class in Artesia, California.
Pass it again, the final version, then it's sent to the president for signature, and it's not a law until that happens. Okay, back to you.
Thank you very much, Senator, and all the class would like to issue 1, 2, 3.
Nathan, tell us about repeaters.
We use special stations, or repeaters, that usually clubs or organizations will set up. They receive the weak signals broadcast by our handhelds and mobiles and rebroadcast them from higher locations and higher power.
And then there are hams like WB2REM, who use remote bases. They use their handy talkies through microprocessors to control a big home-based station. They speak with a big voice most of the time. There's practically no limit to what hams can do with their equipment and ingenuity. Amateur radio has a proud history of service in emergencies. That's a story in itself, told now by veteran newsman Douglas Edwards.
When disasters strike, whether they're natural or man-made, ham radio operators are ready and able to lend a hand. Hams take pride in being able to stay on the air in the worst of circumstances, storms, floods, even earthquakes, and in being able to take their radio gear to wherever it's needed on short notice and put it on the air. When a massive earthquake struck Mexico City in 1985, a few hams with emergency power managed to stay on the air, providing the city's only link with the outside world. Same scene in El Salvador, same story. For days, the only information comes from hams. Closer to home, hams often keep watch for floods and tornadoes, helping the National Weather Service issue prompt warnings. When people are forced from their homes, hams at evacuation shelters help let relatives know where their loved ones are. And of course, there are everyday emergencies, traffic accidents and fires that might be called into centers like this one directly by hams in their cars or using handheld radios. How do these hams know when and where they're needed or what to do when they get there? The answer, organization and training. From a lost child's search to a major disaster, the Amateur Radio Emergency Service can get trained hams quickly to where they can do the most good. And every ham knows that someday, somewhere, just by talking into a microphone, he or she could help save a life.
Looks like 2 cars with injuries.
The amateur radio service is less than 100 years old. Marconi sent the first radio message in 1896. Those early day radios used giant sparks to hurl coded messages that sometimes could be heard 100 miles away. When electronic tubes came along, the range increased. They opened up worldwide communication. The government gave the hams all frequencies below 200 meters, and the amateurs figured out how to use them. And so, ham radio operators pioneered almost all frequencies in use today. In 1914, under the guiding genius of Hiram Percy Maxim, ham radio got itself organized, the better to handle its affairs. The American Radio Relay League, the ARRL, was founded in Connecticut. It's still there, but just look what it's become. Modern buildings, and a dream of a radio station, W1AW, a focal point for organized amateur radio in America. which broadcasts bulletins, QSTs, to pass along ham news. The ARRL sponsors code classes and operating contests on the air. There's a modern electronics laboratory to develop and test equipment in a constantly changing field. A section devoted to handling QSL cards, those colorful souvenirs that hams exchange to verify contacts. There are publications, magazines and technical journals, and books and tapes on how to become a ham. And there's representation, a board of elected directors from all parts of the country who look after amateur affairs, including legal and legislative matters in a very complicated modern world.
The League is a non-profit membership association. It is governed by a board of directors that's elected by the membership, and its policy is made by the board of directors, and we here on the headquarters staff here in Newington are here to implement that policy and support the volunteers who do so much of the work of the League in the field.
And what of the future?
Well, ham radio is growing. We're approaching 2 million amateur radio operators worldwide. And the immediate challenge is going to be to network all of those amateurs together so that they can exchange messages and any other computer-based data using very simple equipment in their homes, using a network that's now under development.
Ham operators have pioneered radio communication, so it was only natural that space would be another frontier for them to explore. Since the 1960s, amateur satellites have been in orbit. We call them Oscars, orbiting satellites carrying amateur radio, made and even launched by several nations. The United States, of course, and France, Japan, which calls theirs Fuji, and Russia. And the Germans worked up the first amateur version of an exciting satellite, one that flies so high and so fast that it appears to be stationary in the sky. So hams on Earth can point their antennas at a single spot, lock in, and start talking through those big repeaters in the sky. Controllers at base stations can provide 24-hour round-the-world communication. And by using Earth-based repeater stations to make contact with the space-based ones, hams can use simple handheld equipment to talk by voice or computer, even leave messages. This is called packet radio. A dedicated group of amateurs organized AMSATs, the Amateur Satellite Corporation, to develop this exciting facet of the new world of amateur radio. Vern Rippertella reflects the dreams of AMSAT.
Well, satellites are probably the leading edge of amateur radio today. There's an enormous challenge in not just in communications and not just in electronics technology, but you learn a little about physics, a little about chemistry, and I've never found anybody who has found satellites wanting for a challenge. It's enormously challenging.
Ham radio operators also have seen members of their fraternity go into space, and they've shared the experience of manned flight aboard the shuttles with Owen Garriott, W5LFL.
This is W5LFL in Columbia. W5LFL in Columbia, orbiting the Earth at an altitude of 135 nautical miles.
And Tony England, W0ORE, who used amateur slow-scan television to show us what it was like up there. Amateur radio's technology is firmly planted on the ground, but the American Radio Relay League, AMSAT, and the astronauts see space looming large in their future. They see manned space stations by the turn of the century, using ham radio as a way of life.
Amateur radio has been with people on the edge of all exploration in the last 50 or more years. It goes to Antarctica, and now it's going into space with us. There are three reasons for having an amateur radio station on space station. The first is recreational radio, just communicating with the community at large. The second role of amateur radio is education, and I'm very excited about that. It'll allow us to share what we're doing on space station, the excitement of the scientific frontier up here, with classrooms in an interactive way. And the third aspect of amateur radio on space station is the more intimate one, but certainly as important, and that's communicating with our families in a very informal way. Over a period of months that we're going to be up here, and 2 years as we're preparing for a Mars mission, it's very nice to have an informal contact with your family and community. All of those three reasons make amateur radio on space station very exciting and attractive to us and attractive to NASA.
To sum it all up, the new world of amateur radio really is new and getting better all the time. We hams are proud of our history and excited by the prospects of our future, a philosophy perhaps best expressed by Senator Goldwater.
I have a lot of fun with it. It's meant a lot to my life, and it's a kind of a, I don't call it a hobby, it's a service. And it's a kind of a service that anybody can get into, any age, from 10 years old to 100 years old, and they'll always enjoy it.
BBC World Service. This is Radio Australia.
Radio Canada International. Hello.
Radio Moscow World Service is...
Roger, Roy. You'll signal 5959 in the Solomon Islands. 9 Victor 1 Whiskey Uniform. 9 Victor 1 Whiskey Uniform. Thank you very much.
The new world of amateur radio. A place of electronic marvels and friendly people. A stage for fun and adventure. This is a ham radio station, specially set up to tune in on that world. And these are our guides. Kelly Howard, N6PNY.
That's N6P Netty. Ham radio's a great way to meet new friends.
Nathan Pyle, KB6PLH.
It's a great way to talk to your friends all over the world.
Roy Neal, a network newsman whose amateur radio call is K6DUE.
You know, if there's one thing we ham radio operators have in common, it's the shuttle.
This is Juliet Yankee number 1. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. This is W5 Lima Foxtrot Lima coming right back. I just passed over the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba. I'm looking down on your country right at this time, sir.
Hams went to a road race in Old Mexico. Amateur radio was there to share the excitement.
We have a Mike Shackey, vehicle number 303, who is also involved in that area, and he needs a four-wheel drive to pull him out with a rope.
Understand. Thank you very much.
If you've ever seen the Parade of Roses...
We are communicators, and we share an adventure every time we turn on our radios. So now, let's set out on our odyssey around the world, around the new world of amateur radio. I'll beam us up into space to one of our astronaut hams, W5LFL, Owen Garriott.
The reception up here is pretty weak. I was not able to pick out as many stations as I wanted, but certainly was hearing them all the way from California to Mexico City, and then a little bit later down into Chile and Argentina.
I can't believe it.
Ham radio is adventure, the thrill of going places and doing things. Some time ago, a group of Australian scientists took an expedition to the Antarctic, to barren Heard Island, and they talked to fellow hams from that land truly down under, a land of the seals and the penguins.
Heard Island. Do you copy Neil Evans?
Congratulations on starting up, and it certainly has me tickled pink to be the first station to work here. VK0HI from VK6 Flying Saucer.
King Hussein of Jordan is JY1. One of his adventures came when astronaut Owen Garriott flew over Jordan in the space